Good morning, Chairman Klein, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to testify on the administration's overtime rule that will impact our students, families, and hundreds of employees at the University of Kansas. When fully implemented, the recent changes to the Fair Labor Standards Act will have a significant impact on the university. KU is a major public research university and is the flagship institution in the state of Kansas. Like many public universities across the country, the percentage of university resources that come from public funding sources has decreased significantly over the past decade. While university leaders agree that an increase to the minimum salary threshold is due, an increase of 100% at one time in 2016 is difficult to absorb without significantly impacting university services. Many employees on college campuses, including KU, are currently exempt from the overtime pay requirements. To comply with the pending increase in the exempt threshold from $23,660 to $47,476, colleges and universities may increase the salaries for a few individuals whose current pay is closest to the new threshold, but will need to reclassify the majority of impacted employees to hourly status. While in some cases these changes are appropriate and would keep with the spirit of the legislation, in many instances KU is being forced to reclassify employees who work in jobs that have always been exempt and are well suited to exempt status. It's KU's position that this widespread reclassification is to the detriment of both our employees and students. As a nonprofit and public entity, KU is reflective of the higher education industry and our inability to absorb the increased costs that come with higher salaries for exempt employees, expanded overtime payments, and other labor and administrative costs associated with transitioning traditionally exempt employees into non-exempt status. In the face of these costs and challenges, KU will ultimately be forced to adjust or reduce services, eliminate or consolidate positions, or at some point raise tuition, all to the detriment of our students. The changes will also increase the cost of and thus inhibit important research done by the university. Unfortunately, due to recent cuts in public funding, the university does not have the central funding flexibility to apply against the financial impacts of the adjusted overtime rule as we enter a new state fiscal year on 1 July. With no central fiscal flexibility, KU is compelled to pass any financial responsibilities for addressing the legislation along to our schools, department, and research centers. Working on relatively fixed budgets, each unit has limited options available to address the mandated changes. In the short term, the primary impact will be felt in the reduction of services or the elimination of positions. Ultimately, our most important stakeholders, students, will bear the burden of these adjustments. As of June 6, 2016, the university has 354 currently exempt employees impacted by the revised overtime rule. The projected cost to raise these employees to the new annual salary threshold is around $3 million. The alternative, if chosen, is to switch these employees to a non-exempt status and pay them overtime. The projected overtime cost to sustain our current level of services is roughly equivalent to the cost to raise each employee to the new exempt threshold. Since neither of these options are currently financially feasible for any of KU's units, it is inevitable that there will be a reduction in the services currently being provided by KU units to students as we transition employees from their current exempt to non-exempt status without the flexibility of working more than 40 hours per week, regardless of mission demands. The one relatively flexible financial lever that the university has to increase revenue is to raise tuition. Tuition increases need to be approved by the Kansas Board of Regents and are justifiably closely scrutinized. For the upcoming fiscal year, beginning in July, the window to use a tuition increase to help mitigate the impact of the new overtime rule in 2016 and 2017 has closed. It is probable, however, that tuition will ultimately be pushed higher in future years in order to address the enduring impacts of the new overtime rule. Due to both the near and long-term fiscal impacts of the new overtime rule, KU believes that the Protecting Workplace Advancement and Opportunity Act is important legislation because it would require a more detailed economic analysis, including understanding and mitigating the impacts on higher education, before these dramatic changes to federal overtime pay requirements are fully implemented. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, at KU we appreciate the administration's ambitious agenda to promote affordable, high-quality educational opportunities, expanding access to college, and providing the support necessary to drive students to on-time completion and long-term success. However, the new changes to the overtime rule represents a major expense for public university and puts our campus in further financial strain as we continue to deal with decreased state funding. There is simply no way for universities like KU to absorb costs of this magnitude without an impact on our academic research and outreach missions that will be felt by the public and students we serve. Thank you.